Hi, my name is Zach Martin. I'm a fifth grade mathematics and social studies teacher at Wadena Deer Creek School District. And I'm going to start off talking about the demographics of our school using the Minnesota report card. And here I took our school demographics and compared that with the state demographics to get a better perspective on things. So, our school is in central rural Minnesota. So looking at this first graph about race and ethnicity, you can see that about 91% of our students are white. We have about 2.5% are two or more races, and the next biggest percentage for race would be 4%. We have a population of about 985 students. Comparing that with the state has about 68% of the population is white, and then far more ethnicities overall. Now, scrolling down a little bit to look at some other things. So, our free and reduced lunch numbers are pretty high compared to many districts. We have about 50% of our population on free or reduced lunch. We are in a high poverty county, and we'll take a look at some other statistics in just a moment. And that's compared to the statewide population of about 38% on free or reduced lunch. Looking at our special ed population, we have about 18% of our students that are receiving special ed education services, compared to that of the state has about 15% of the learners receiving special education services. Now, moving on to looking at some other data, I found some data from Data USA on Wadena, Minnesota compared to Minnesota in general. Our population is just over 4,000. Our median household income is a little over 34,000. Comparing that median household income compared to the state of Minnesota is at just over 63,000. We are at a poverty rate of 23.8% compared to that of Minnesota at 10.2%. And we are one of the highest poverty counties in the state of Minnesota. Now, looking at some of our test scores from last year, so with math, our test scores compared to other communities in this area, we're kind of in the middle of the road at 54.3% of our students met or exceeded the standards in mathematics. Now, looking at this next category, I know it's not labeled here, but it is for reading. Our reading scores showed that 62.7% of our students met or exceeded the standards in reading for their MCAs. And then the right column shows that we are the tops in the area for science in their MCA scores, with 67.9% of our students meeting or exceeding the standards. Now, the next thing I want to look at is a survey that I gave to my students that I have for mathematics, and I just called it a Getting to Know My Students. So, the first question I posed to them is, what is something I should know about you? We have a lot of different responses here. I'm very talkative. I have an interesting one here. I can't see my dad for 2 years. I'm not going to read through all of these at this time, but my parents are divorced. Things I like to know, especially since I grew up in a family with divorced parents, and I can relate to those students really well. Then my next question that I pose to my students is, who lives in your house? Because there's many different family situations, especially in our county, being in a county with a high rate of poverty, and I want to know what their family life is sort of like. So whether or not they are with the mom and dad and siblings, whether or not they're separate, is something that I'd like to know. I'm not going to scroll through all of those because a couple kids did put in family names. Now, looking at my next question, I asked them, out of the options below, what is your favorite school subject? And I was kind of surprised but happy that 41.9% of my students said math was their favorite subject, followed by science at just over 30%, reading at over 23%, and then followed by social studies. And then next question I posed to them: what is the primary language spoken in your house? And the majority of them said English, and one of them said Russian and English, and I'm not sure if they were truthful on that one. And the last question I posed to them: did you meet or exceed the standards on your MCA math test last year? And 53 and 5/10% said they did. Over 37% didn't know, and over 9% said no. This is information that I have not yet been able to get from testing from the people in the elementary school. They have not yet responded to me with the actual numbers. So I wanted to see what the students actually knew about their own test scores. Now, looking at some things on my teaching from the past, one of the tests that we use in our school to assess our students in reading and mathematics is called FastBridge. And we're going to look at some of the test results that I had from my students last year according to their math scores. So, for some reason that's not showing up. Anyways, that is supposed to be a scale scores of showing college pathways. So in the fall, if college pathways, some risk and high risk. So in the fall, if a student scored greater than 220, they were on the college pathway. If they scored less than 214, they were at some risk, and 207 was high risk. In the winter, the college pathway students scoring greater than 225 and some risk were at less than 220, and high risk were at less than 211. And in the spring, the college pathway were shown at greater than 230, some risk at less than 223, and high risk at less than 214. And I'm not sure why that didn't show up there. So, taking a look at some of those scores, I'm not going to read through all of them, but I've included it without any student names on here for privacy data reasons. And you can see that the majority of my students showed a good amount of growth, not necessarily all of them showing college pathway, which I don't honestly like that term in this test anyways. So that's what the general goal is. We want to see growth throughout the year with our students. The main thing I want to see here is that the group average. So with the group average, with the fall test, my students scored at 212.4 with one of my classes, and that was at some risk. And in the winter, they scored at 217. That was still at some risk. And at the spring, they scored at 223. That was still at some risk. All of them were right on the border of the college pathway results. These are the results from my previous class. We have a couple high flyers in that class, and then it does go off to some kind of national average numbers. And then the highlighted ones here are students that were receiving interventions, and some of the students on here were also receiving special education services. Now, my second mathematics class that I taught last year had a group average in the spring of 211. Again, that was at some risk. Then 214 was also at some risk, and 219 was at some risk. One of the biggest challenges in my school is getting support from many parents. Having many families in poverty really at times make it difficult to communicate with parents and to have their support with learning in school. I've asked around with my colleagues and community members, and many of them has stated the same type of answer. And I asked them, why do we have such high poverty in our area? And the similar answer is that I got from most of them was on the lines that our county has a lot of services for people that are in poverty, and it attracts even more people to move into our county. So again, that's the opinion that I got from many people that I work with or people in the community on why we have such a high rate of poverty. Thank you for watching my video, and I look forward to working with you all.